Dad, what's the future gonna look like?
Thank you so much, and it is so good to be back with this group once more and be able to share all the things the company has been able to achieve over the course of the last year and some of the exciting things we have ahead. It's been a series of aviation firsts, many we hadn't anticipated, but the continued pace of development, the continued pace of achievement, not just by us, but actually by some of our customers, has been remarkable. Last year, I spoke to you about where we were with personal aircraft, personal aviation, recreation. It is Part 1 of 3 aircraft, after all, the one that we've gone to market with initially. And the Helix is now very close to production, in the final stages of flight testing. And I said, we're going to go explore defense missions, we're going to go explore public safety missions, and the reception has been, well, nothing short of fantastic. And we'll actually walk through what some of those missions are. So we've made the transition from a solution in search of the right problems to now we're finding what are the most high-value problems, what are the problems that we can solve better than any other technology applying the tilt aircraft architecture. Well, in our space, generally, this technology space of eVTOL aircraft, I think there's big tailwinds for a few of the leaders. I think things are actually pretty exciting. We see an attitude, and we're starting to see actions from regulators unlike we've enjoyed before. There's still some work to do to get to the finer details. I do think that power lift remains most burdened, but the regulatory environment is no doubt improving in a massive way, and perhaps there will be a time where we're not in the ultralight category, and I think that's going to happen sooner rather than later, although we'll start with service-specific airworthiness rather than in the civil side. We're also seeing consumer acceptance, and we believe that this aircraft is actually going to be a big piece of why folks are going to be willing to board an air taxi that looks like that a few years down the road. We see the operations being pursued by emergency medical personnel being dispatched to save lives early rather than later as a real stepping stone to public acceptance. Now, the fact that it's quiet, the fact that it's got an incredibly low acoustic signature and operations cost doesn't hurt. Well, in terms of those, strong tailwinds for eVTOL, well, what's going on? Well, we've seen all the press, we've seen the support from the FAA, we've seen the executive orders, we've seen the push to get more of this up there. And we're excited to be a part of it, and we're excited to have started doing that back in 2023 when we started our early access program, became the first company on the planet to deliver privately owned powered lift eVTOL aircraft to private owners who've been out there flying their cloud-connected aircraft at their pace, on their rules, within guidelines, of course, for, in some cases, almost 2 years. And it's done a lot to inform our transition to production with the Helix. But finally, let's not forget, we're not the only ones pursuing this dream. And in China, they're going to have nothing short of 100 eVTOL companies in their low altitude economy within the next couple of years, by 2030. This is huge. So the innovation is happening not just here, it's happening all over the world, and it's happening writ large in China for sure. Well, let's bring you up to speed a little bit on this tilt aircraft eVTOL and why it is such an effective architecture and why it is something we're able to scale with. This is one of my early concerns when I joined the company is this is a fantastic implementation. It's simple. It has a dozen control surfaces, not 30 or 40. It's light. These guys have a knack for building with exceptionally low mass. Well, is it going to scale? We found, and we were talking about math earlier, well, the math says it'll scale it nicely into the low thousands of pounds of gross takeoff weight. So that's not going to be a 30-passenger regional transport solution, but there's a lot in between that and a lot of very valuable missions we'll be pursuing. Well, this is what the smaller aircraft look like. This is the Class 1, we call it. This is the Helix, and it's got an empty weight well under 500 pounds. 348 is actually what we're at today. Triple redundant flight compute, redundancy in all the propulsion and energy storage, and we've been flying the Blackfly V-33, the developmental aircraft, for years and years. First flown in Oshkosh in 2019 in front of a loving audience of about 150,000. Now, well, we'll talk about how many flights we've accumulated. As you grow the footprint of the aircraft, there's a short path to actually get to an intermediate aircraft using the same propulsion units that we have today. This increases their count. We've got the ability to increase wingspan, gross takeoff weight, cargo mass fraction considerably, and that also gives you a much wider range of relevant missions. So another thing that we had talked to you all about last year is, well, we're going to gut our teeth in hybrid. Well, we've done that. I'd love to say we've accumulated thousands of flights in hybrid. We're not quite there yet, but the power plant's built. It's been running in Hill for months, and we're ready to take it to the sky before the end of the year and complete that benchmark of a 300-mile flight from northern to southern California. In Class 2, we can start introducing hybrid propulsion and still have room for passenger, cargo. But one thing we're going to continue to focus on is keeping the technology optionally manned or optimally manned at all times. It'll function as well as remotely piloted aircraft, with or without a passenger, with or without a pilot, have the autonomy to support it, operate in GPS-denied environments, and so forth. What happens when you really bump up in size? Now we're at a gross takeoff weight, something just under 5,000 pounds. We deliver a cargo mass fraction of about 2,000 pounds. We can fly at the upper end of rotary wing cruise speeds. We're talking around 140, 150 knots. This has a level of operational relevance that really matters. And it's something the Department of Defense and others are extremely interested in moving forward with. That said, it's not for every mission. If you want to fly really fast, this probably isn't it. But if efficiency matters, efficiency is where this aircraft architecture wins almost every time. With only a dozen control surfaces, imagine how much hardware we're not taking up with us, that the customer isn't paying for, that isn't contributing negatively to the reliability of the aircraft. It's huge. So again, here's another concept scaled all the way up to that just under 5,000 pounds gross takeoff weight. Hybrid propulsion, series hybrid with 2 power generation channels. Well, of all the defense missions that we've surveyed, that we've collaborated with our partners in, from the Air Force to the Navy to Army, the one that seems to ring high value, relative near-term need, but oh, by the way, no hugely funded program of record quite yet, is that contested logistics space that requires the level of autonomy that we're pursuing, that requires that mass fraction of cargo delivered, and where we believe efficiency matters. The fewer gargantuan fuel bladders that can be carried into theater and we still achieve the warfighter's mission, that'll be part of how we win. And another thing that cannot be ignored is delivering it all at a near attritable cost. If this is all done for half the cost or less of a Black Hawk UH-60, I think that matters. Delivering value to our taxpayer is a big deal to win the future fight. So their enemies are doing the same for them. Some of the nearer-term missions that we're there on is clandestine insertion and extraction. This is something we can pretty much do like now. And as if not the quietest aircraft in powered flight, manned-powered flight and cruise, maybe second. I think there's a motor glider that's coming in a little bit quieter than we are. That audible signature matters. That low thermal signature matters. The ability to fly as an additional skill, not necessarily as a full-time vocation, matters. You deliver a special team in somewhere pretty deep, pretty fast, pretty quiet, and be gone before anybody knew you were there. Casualty evacuation has been something this whole community has talked about quite a bit. And we're doing it a couple different ways. One is on the civilian side. We'll share more about that in a second. But in the military sense, the doctrine today is it's a medevac. It's an attending medic or a nurse or physician. It's a pilot and crew. It's an aircraft. That doctrine probably won't last the first 5 minutes of a peer-on-peer conflict, quite frankly. And we need to be ready to deliver that capability to our services in time for whenever that is. The tie back to contested logistics is a similar one, similar class of aircraft, similar levels of autonomy. And then finally, we've got the maritime support mission, the ship-to-shore logistics, and this, to me, is a pretty obvious one as a must-have for the Indo-PACOM scenarios. And capable of being retasked mid-flight, capable of being flown with a pilot in the seat or not. This is the level of flexibility we need to deliver. Another operation on the civilian side that's come up is in firefighting, and these were some of the missions we weren't necessarily anticipating. We certainly believe that there's a strong advantage to having an electric small single-person aircraft that could be dispatched at a moment's notice and be off the ground in under a minute if it's on standby. You can't do that with a helicopter. You can't land anywhere with a helicopter. You land in some very tight spaces with this. That it would find that home in EMS, but when we engage the emergency services folks, they're like, well, we've got a lot of things we could be doing with this right now in firefighting, and some more obvious than others, but we're using pack mules to support our smoke jumpers today. We think that there's a there if you could give us a cargo variant. We would like to be able to bring back an injured firefighter on the spot without sending out a helicopter to extract them and replace him with a fresh troop. So those are some of the additional firefighting concepts that we're exploring today, but something we're actually much closer to and will be in operations at 2 sites this year is EMS. So, well, what is the EMS mission? The EMS mission is all about putting a trained paramedic on site, flies in, or she flies in, that eVTOL to the location of the victim where it will make a huge difference in the outcome. And in that golden hour, if it's a cardiac, if it's a case, if it's a stroke, if it is any number of gunshot trauma or other cases, the presence of that trained medical professional, quite possibly talking live to an emergency medical doctor in an ER with streaming video, can be a huge difference maker. And we see a high willingness to pursue adoption of the aircraft, the training, all under public aircraft operations, provided we're able to continue to deliver on the so far perfect safety basis that we've maintained over the course of the years. And here you can actually see this guy is a licensed paramedic. He does not hold a pilot certificate, but he's one of the most prolific pilots we have, and quite possibly one of the most prolific powered lift pilots on the planet now. This is the Consumers Fire Department up in Sacramento. But let's not, forget about where we started and where we're going to continue to pursue, and that is short hop travel and recreation. The base aircraft, the Blackfly, which graduated to become the Helix in production, is an unbelievable flying experience. I really hope I get to see more of you come through our ranks and get trained and learn to fly, because it is easy, it is safe, it is fun, and it is an unbelievable way to spend a weekend flying over some of those beautiful places the country has to offer. And this is where we started. This is where we're going to continue to find considerable demand and opportunity to have an installed base of cloud-connected aircraft that are informing our development every single day. With every single flight, we're ingesting about 900 megabytes of telemetry, from which we're able to infer operator behavior, from which we're able to infer safety, from which we're able to infer maintenance schedules. And what we've found after doing this for a couple years now, with a privately owned fleet of about a half a dozen aircraft out there, and having gone through the developmental testing with the non-developmental testing with Air Force, with 8 aircraft, is it's a very low-cost thing to operate once you acquire it. And all the maintenance activities we've had to date have not been driven by wear, with the exception of this one small part we call the keel strip. They've all been driven by excursions, like I smacked a rock with a propeller, or I cut the grass with a propeller, something along those lines. So let's talk about what that installed base and our test pilots have been able to achieve, to date. We're now well over 8,000 total flights, and granted, the first 6,000 of those were almost all remotely piloted or autonomous. We've now explored well over 100 flight locations around the US, and now Canada, and soon New Zealand, and soon others. Very excited to be moving forward on that. I think last year at this time, we had been in about 30 locations, maybe 35. And now we also boast 50 fully trained pilots who could walk up to a Blackfly or a Helix aircraft and take to the sky. That's an exciting thing, and it's an exciting thing to be a part of. And, to make it just a little bit more real, we now have an airframe that has accumulated 1,000 flights. There isn't a eVTOL that's come even close to this anywhere in the world, but Blackfly 50, better known as TL39 for us, it's its tail number, has now surpassed 1,000 flights by our number one customer and his rather large constellation of friends and family who have invested their hard-earned money in becoming a certified pilot of our aero architecture and are ready to fly the Blackfly and the Helix today. So all of these smiling faces are folks who came through our training. It was about 2 weeks on average. There are a few aviators that actually cut through it a little bit faster. It's all task-based, heavy on sim, because every flight's a solo. And in the future, we're going to be looking at ways to reduce the training burden. But the fact of the matter is, when you've got all this autonomy, and it's anything less than 10 to the negative ninth reliable, you've got to teach your customer what is it like when X doesn't work. They have to know how to respond to that. That does increase the training burden for sure. But I would add to this that we're also the most pervasively flown powered lift aircraft in the globe right now. Where's Chris from FAA? The most pervasively powered lift flown aircraft in the world today. Augusta Westland would not disclose the number of test flights they've had in the 22 years of their certification campaign, but we believe it to be about 900. And we're well over 2,000 manned flights and counting. It's been an exciting time. I'm so glad to have the support of the UP team and of all of you in watching this aero architecture find its home in defense, public service, and of course, short hop travel and recreation. And thank you all for your support of this journey.
The future is gonna be awesome.